Kui, Namalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian, and today I will be talking about my most surprising and favorite books of 2023. So I think I mentioned this in one of my wrap-ups. I think it was my 2023 wrap-up. But ultimately, like, it felt like 2023 in terms of reading was kind of just meh. But going through all the books that I read in 2023, there were a couple of them that stood out. So much like, I don't know if this one will probably go up after my most disappointing reads of 2023, but much like that one, I'm just kind of going to go through. I'm not going to hold anything up. My apologies. But I am just going to go through as I read them, in the order in which I read them. I will, though, however, separate the nonfiction from the fiction. So let's go ahead and get into my favorite nonfictions for the year. First one is Rain, A Natural and Cultural History by Cynthia Barnett, narrated by Christina Traister. This one is obviously a nonfiction about rain. I did really enjoy this, the exploration of rain and like how we try to control it and how its effect on society and as a culture. What I particularly remember getting really upset about how many times Cynthia used the term deluge. It felt like too many, and I don't know if it was because of how many times Cynthia put in deluge, or just the fact that Christina emphasized on it so much. I was just tired of the word deluge by that point. So, but otherwise I thought it was a really interesting book, really fun, and I love the cover. It's absolutely stunning. Next is Ghostland, An American History and Haunted Places by Colin Dickey and narrated by John Lindstrom. This one was really fun. I wasn't sure. This was one of the ones that I'm just calling my Oregon books at this point, in which I found it in Oregon. I don't think I bought it in Oregon, but I did order it later on because it stuck out to me. And I'm hoping that I get like a 2024 version of the same thing. Not of Ghostland, but of like my Oregon books, because we are going up there again. But Ghostland was just really, I wasn't sure what to expect from this. I guess I was kind of just expecting this trail going into the same haunted places that I've heard from time and time again. But we actually not only dove into some of those places, but learned, I feel like Colin Dickey took a more interesting approach in that he looked at why some of these places were counted as haunted, and going into some of the disparities within that society of the local area in terms of, these places were considered haunted to keep colored folks away, or to keep colored folks within the area. Why is the Winchester House considered haunted why was the widow considered so eccentric and like witchy, when ultimately like she was just an eccentric, or that she was haunted, or like she was crazy because she had money and she like didn't particularly like talking to people, and people don't like single women with a bunch of money. So he took an interesting perspective on it, and I really enjoyed it, because it's something that I hadn't heard before, and as well as there was just multiple interesting approaches that Colin Dickey definitely took upon these haunted places, and I really enjoyed it. I'd highly recommend. The Fire Never Goes Out by N.D. Stevenson. I really enjoyed this memoir. I don't rate them, but I thought it was a really unique take. I haven't read a graphic memoir before. This one was very touching. It was very, we follow N.D. Stevenson as they explore themselves, and trying to figure out the anxiety they feel in terms of figuring out, like, as they're creating their art, as they're gaining successes, like what is there to continue, but why do they still feel this like thing in their heart, like why aren't they happy? But we're exploring a bunch of things that they're feeling that I feel like a lot of people feel, really. And it's, I think, even more impactful with the graphics that Andy Stevenson illustrates in terms of illustrating themselves. And we can see the expression, the emotion come through the illustrations. I love their illustrations. It's really fun. I have yet to read Nimona, but I hope to at some point. But this one, it was just really fun learning more about the artist, the illustrator, particularly through an illustrative lens. So, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. This one was the final book that I needed to read from Caitlin Doughty's like back work. So this is another memoir, so I didn't rate it, but I do enjoy it because we go through more of Caitlin Doughty's personal history in terms of how she got into being a cremator, how she was interested in being a mortician, and like what drew her to it. We also see her struggles as she faces death and as she comes to realize that like some of the places that she's living in isn't that great. Some of the connections she's making isn't reciprocal. It's very one-sided in terms of like a relationship, or even like when it comes to the relationships that she's making within the industry and the people that are looking out for her. It was really touching, and it gets very vulnerable, and I really enjoyed it. It was always seen Caitlin Doughty, like I've seen Caitlin Doughty's YouTube, I've read her other books, Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, and the one where she explores different types of how people deal with death throughout different cultures throughout the world. This one is more introspective in terms of how Caitlin Doughty got interested in the almost trauma of witnessing something when she was a child, and how that has kind of lingered throughout her life. So, it was a lot. Another memoir is Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson, narrated by Jenny Lawson. This one I remember being hesitant in picking up because I read a Jenny Lawson, narrated by Jenny Lawson before. It was the one with the mouse with the cape on the cover. And I wasn't connecting with her. There was a lot of things that she found funny, or that she thought was funny, and like I didn't feel it was funny, and she like had warned us right off the bat that, you know, something's going to offend you. Yeah, something did offend me, and so I was really kind of hesitant going into Broken. But Broken in the Best Possible Way I thought was surprising because she goes into more of her mental health in terms of her mental health, as well as her physical health and the problems that she's had with healthcare. And there were still some elements that I'm like, yeah, that's the Jenny Lawson that I remember. But other bits were very interpersonal and very like there was more connection as opposed to trying to dissuade with humor, if that makes sense. I find that when she does that and she kind of gets on this tangent of trying to prove just how weird and funny she is, that's the part that I'm like, I don't like this. But when she's being honest and she's like, she's making mistakes, and those inherently kind of are funny, that's where I connect with her more. But I also just love this cover as well. I thought it was amazing that the cover was inspired by an artist's work, and she asked the artist if they could recreate it for her cover, and I love it so much. It's very striking. I don't think I'll get rid of the book just because I enjoy this cover so much, but I am glad that I listened to the book and I did enjoy it. So next we have Screaming on the Inside, The Unsustainability of American Motherhood by Jessica Gross, narrated by Suwaila El Attar. I apologize if I said that wrong. This one, I'm not sure what I was expecting. I rated this for 4.5 stars, but I think I put it as a 5-star on Goodreads because it was getting so many low ratings because it was offending people. And it's mostly because Jessica Gross is non-BIPOC author. She understands that, and she understands that comes with privileges, as well as the fact that she earns money, her husband earns money, and so there's other privileges that they have that others can't afford. And so and she recognizes that, and as well as recognizing that what we see on Instagram, on social media, etc., isn't always true, and that there's a system behind it. And because she's critiqued that social media look on motherhood, a lot of women, particularly white women, who feel connected to those social medias are offended and are rating this book low. But ultimately, it's a look at America's lack of support for motherhood and everything you have to deal with when it comes to not only just social media and look of a mother and how a mother should look, but also how you should act, how you should be able to afford, how you should teach, how you should parent of sorts. It was really interesting. I read it not because, like, I do eventually hope to have kids, and not anytime soon. I'm in no position to do so, but it is something that I look into every so often, and this one was really helpful in my mind, and I love how deep Jessica goes into it. Yeah, I think I think that's why I rated it a 4.5, is that I feel like she could have even gone further, but I enjoyed what she was able to do. Next, I have All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell, narrated by Haley Campbell. And this one is another book on death. I do enjoy books on death because I am very much interested in it. If you didn't know, I lost a brother in 2018, and I think ever since then it's been one of those things that I've explored to help with my own grief, to better understand what happens and how others feel about it, to kind of like know that I'm not alone, and to also prepare myself for if that happens again. I've always kind of had not morbid morbid fascinations anyway, but I think losing my brother pushed it even further. So All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell is very reminiscent of Caitlin Doughty's work, and in fact Haley Campbell even mentions Caitlin Doughty, but I think this is even this is an interesting aspect in terms of not so much going into the culture, different cultures in around the world, but going into who works with death in a society. And I think she takes some interesting points. She goes to a fair amount of people. Like, she goes to the obvious of goes to the people that people who donate their bodies to science. She goes to doctors. She goes to kind of the obvious ones. Morticians. She goes to as well as people who clean up murder scenes, crime scenes. But the fact that she goes to executioners in a prison or midwives, I think is something that we don't want to think about, and she takes the time to think about and takes the time to mention it, which I really appreciated and I really enjoy. So this is also like a 4.5 for me. She even goes into the fact that how writing this book affected her, and I will say look up content warnings for this book, because she goes into and talks to midwives that deal with death. There is also pretty descriptive scenes of, it's not just the midwives, but it's also medical examiners who look into an array of bodies of every age. So please take care of yourself and look into content warnings before reading this book, because there were moments where I cried with Haley, because I'm like, that is intense, and that Haley was describing how this had affected her, how it's crazy. Anyway, another one I highly suggest if you're into death books at all. And then my last nonfiction is going to be The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, narrated by Scott Brick. This one, of course, is looking, not of course, but this one is looking into our food industry of sorts. Michael Pollan is creating like 3 or 4 meals, and is tracking everything within the meal from start to finish. So like, he eats a McDonald's meal, where does that food start off from, and can he track it to his plate of sorts? The same with like organic, the same with small farmers, the same with hunting on it and foraging on his own. I liked it. It is relatively older. I believe it was from the early 2000s. It still holds up in my opinion in terms of the critiques of the food industry, particularly like the extent of how much corn we're eating. Wish he would have had the same extent on in terms of how much he put into the food industry as he did with. I wish he would have had as much as he had with that into the foraging and in the hunting, because there's only a couple people that he talked to in terms of hunting and foraging within the Bay Area, and I feel like he could have pushed it further in terms, and I said this in my wrap up when finishing this, is that I particularly wanted to see more perspectives, because he mentions multiple times when foraging, like, oh, this was someone's food source like 1,000 years ago. It's just like it was very much past tense, when in fact there are still native populations within the Bay Area that still go out and collect for food. I think that is a huge thing within today's hunting and foraging culture, in terms of native peoples having that still a part of their culture and having to fight for that to be a part of their culture with local government, with national government or federal government, because of national parks, because of all these restrictions, because of property lines and everything, but to be able, as well as fishing rights, and all of it is political. And I wish he would have got into that, because as he did, like, he didn't really, and that I think is a huge thing, particularly when it comes to other people foraging. I know here locally too, even when it's like non-native folks foraging, other people foraging, in terms of property lines and permits, as well as hunting, it's the same issue, property lines and permits, and who it benefits and who it doesn't. So that I kind of wish was more explored. But otherwise, it was still a relevant book for being produced in the early 2000s. Okay, let's go ahead and go into fiction now. Okay, let's go ahead and start on my most surprising fictions. First is In the Company of Witches by Orly Wallace, narrated by Cassidy Brown. This is the first in the Evenfall Witches B&B duology. The first book, In the Company of Witches, we're following Bryn, who is a witch, and she ends up going through a loss. So she kind of hides herself away and is working for her aunts, who own an Airbnb. Her aunts are also witches. The town of Evenfall knows they're a quirky family, but doesn't suspect that they're witches. But one day, one of their patrons within the Airbnb ends up dying. It's presumed an accident until the cops get involved and start looking at one of the aunts as the prime suspect. And so Bryn has to figure out what's going on and who's framing her aunt. I was a little skeptical, mostly because I don't mind this cover, but that and everyone was, or I say everyone, Jan from Jan Agaton was comparing it to Gilmore Girls meets Practical Magic. I would definitely say yes on the practical magic element, the movie, not the book. The movie has more magical elements. I don't know about Gilmore Girls, mostly because I've only watched a couple episodes of it and I got bored. So I'm not a good one for that. But I was surprised because it did go into, like, it was a cozy witchy mystery, which is what I was looking for throughout all of 2023 to like match the secret society of irregular witches. There we go. There was a couple of them that weren't bad, but this one in particular I really enjoyed. Not only the coziness of it, and like Bryn trying to figure out in terms of who was actually behind it, and who and how this affected her magic, because it did, not so much the mystery but the loss, but also like the grief, going into the grief and like exploring her feelings about it. I don't know, it was sweet. I did end up tearing up when she did finally, like, when there was like this resolve. It was just so cute. Okay. Anyway, okay. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I guess I wasn't too surprised, but I was still surprised about this. Mostly because, okay, it's hard to, I have another Alice Feeney on this list, but it's in one of my favorites. This one was a surprise to me just because it did surprise me ultimately. I didn't know where it was going. I was not originally interested in Rock, Paper, Scissors because of how everyone was explaining it. We follow this couple who have won not excursion, but like this stay at this church turned, not a bed and breakfast. It's like a church turned into a home that is now like available for vacationers, but they end up going in like the worst part of the year where it's all wintry and like stormy, to the point where when they get there they're stuck there and they're not alone. And of course they're keeping secrets from one another. I really enjoyed it. It was really surprising. The twist and turn of it was amazing. So did not see that coming. So interested in more of Alice Feeney's work. Next is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. The reason why this surprised me is because I had tried reading it a couple times and had a problem with the God aspect of it. I couldn't follow it, and every time I tried to read it, I don't know, my brain just wouldn't comprehend it, and so I got frustrated and kept putting it down. I finally just ended up listening to it and got past the God part into the main storyline, where we follow Dex, a gender nonconforming monk who is in one sect of the monkhood and then decides that they want to be a tea monk instead, thinking that this would make them happier. It does make them happy for a little bit, but then they find themselves in the same slump that they were in before. So they go out into the wild. This is in terms of, it's like a dystopian future of sorts. People haven't been in the wild in a while. There's like certain rules that you're supposed to abide by. But Dex goes into the wild and a robot ends up stumbling upon them and asking them the question, what do humans need? And it's been centuries since humans and robots have been separated, and so this question is really big to answer. So Dax ends up like kind of teaming up with the robot to help them answer this question. It was really cute. It was really cozy, really short. I kind of wish it was a little longer to help it kind of explain the God aspect of it, because I swear every time that got brought up I'm like, what? I don't know why, but ultimately really enjoyed it. I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised because I love the Wayfarer series, but I think it was just because it's not a cozy space book set in space with cozy characters that I was just like, how's this gonna go? And the fact that I had a hard time getting into the first part with the gods and everything, that I think surprised me too. So yeah. Next is Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. Okay, so the reason why this is surprising is because I don't think anyone really expected what it actually was. This was marketed as a horror. It's kind of giving, the synopsis kind of gives that, in terms of we're following this young woman who has this nightmare, wakes up, and she has a crow's head in her, she wakes up with a crow's head in her hand. Elements of her dreams are coming into reality for her. She's waking up like coughing up water. She is waking up freezing after dreaming she was in the snow. And she's having these dreams after her sister dies. So because of this, she ends up going home to her family. She like ran away at one point. Not like she ran away in sorts and like ran away from her family because she couldn't deal with how everyone else was reacting to her sister's death. Her sister's, not even just her sister's death, their grandmother's death. It was really good, and a really good talk on how to go about grieving with others. But when she gets to this house, there's something there, and it took a little bit for me because I felt like it took a little too long for our main character to fess up of sorts of what was happening to her. But I thought the talk on grief in this was really good, and the fact that it was mixed in this kind of grief horror, which didn't know it was a thing, was really interesting to me. I was sobbing, like ugly crying by the end of this book. It's not what I expected, but I still really enjoyed it. And the final surprising book was A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I don't know why this keeps surprising me that I enjoyed it, and I think it's because I did read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, but for some reason in my mind, because that was a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, it was different. That's like, doesn't mean I'm gonna like T. Kingfisher because it's a retelling. So then when reading A House with Good Bones, I wasn't too sure what I was expecting, and I really did enjoy it. The main character is plus size. She talks about it, and there's a lot of fourth wall breaks that I really enjoyed. She was funny and she was quirky, and I enjoyed it. It was an interesting horror aspect. There was something in the beginning that I had mentioned in my review in terms of like the reason why our main character has to go home is because her job is stalled. She identifies bugs in archaeological sites. So as she's heading up to a dig, they find human remains. It is then put on hold. It can be put on hold for months to years because of NAGPRA, which is never mentioned, and it should have been, I feel like, because I think that's an educational, like, I think that it's a missed opportunity for education. And I think it could have gone a little bit further into explaining it of why it takes so long, because it's like government entities working with each other, and that takes forever, particularly tribal government entities working with federal, which technically it's still federal, but like working with it. So yeah, anyway, but yeah, our main character has to go home and because of that, and she had heard from her brother that their mom was acting a little weird. And when she gets there, she understands what he means, and that she's like purposely misremembering certain things, that she's dressing a certain way, that she's acting a certain way within the house. And I finding I enjoy it. It did get really weird within the last bit, and really creepy. Yeah, I think I still remember listening to this and finishing it, and like as I was listening to it and going, I need a physical copy, went into my local bookstore and was like, do you have this yet? No, I need to order it. And like continuing on to go file my taxes and just remembering the weird little baby Nami things. Anyway, really enjoyed it, really like very visual aspects, and I really had fun with it. Okay, so we'll go ahead into my runner-ups, like honorable mentions. I'll just go ahead and go into honorable mentions real quick. First being The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters, narrated by Elia Warbus and Jordan Wanch. 4.75, 4.5 star, 5-star raid ish. I'm still thinking about it. Because originally I put it as 5 stars, but the reason why I'm kind of downgrading a little bit is because it didn't, when looking at my favorites, I kind of skipped over it a couple times. I love the cover, absolutely gorgeous cover. I think it's an important story in terms of what its kind of overall messaging is. We are following two perspectives. Joe, who is Mi'kmaq, whose family is Mi'kmaq, they come from Canada to go to Maine and berry pick for the season to earn money. When he's 6 years old, his younger sister Ruthie disappears. The family can't find her, the other workers can't find her, no one will help them because they're technically not US citizens and they're Indigenous. So we see the effect that this has on the family throughout the rest of the book. The guilt that Joe feels for being the one that saw Ruthie last and was the one that was supposed to watch her. The guilt that he has for this. We also have another perspective of Oh, I forget her name. Is it Norma? It's a name I don't really like, but we are following her perspective. She is a young girl in Maine who grows up in Maine with an overbearing, overprotective mother and a emotionally distant father. But some things in her childhood don't add up. But anytime she mentions it, her mother gets upset, has a headache, etc. So she ends up getting these, Norma, I think is her name, gets these anxieties that come with that in terms of never wanting to make her mom upset, never wanting to make her mom have a headache. So she feels like she's walking on eggshells until later on, her mom, in the throes of dementia after losing her husband, ends up revealing a family secret. And so then Norma has to rethink everything in terms of how she fits in with this family, and as well as her whole childhood. So really, I think, important aspect of it. I think there was just something about it that I'm thinking about now that could have been pushed a little further. But I think it's an important, like, almost introductory into the theme that it's exploring. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, narrated by Julia Whalen. I don't know why this surprised me, but it also is a runner-up because I did really enjoy it. It's a friends to lovers of sorts, but I also thought it had some good conversations in terms of what it means to become friends to lovers, and particularly making split decisions like that. So we are following this young woman who every summer takes a trip with her best friend, this guy that she met in college, and they've been doing that every year. But we know that in the last time they went, which was a couple years ago, something happened, and so to try to kind of get their friendship back, she asks him if he wants to do a vacation again. He says yes, but has some restrictions because he ultimately needs to go to his brother's wedding, and so they take a vacation in Palm Springs, which I thought was hilarious. It was very humorous, very thought-provoking, and I like, not thought-provoking, but it was just a fun kind of rom-com with some interesting elements in terms of trying to force something that can no longer fit. I really enjoyed it, and was really happy with it. So I think another runner-up, or like honorable mention, is the this feels so wrong though. Fuck. Okay. Okay. So I think that's it for my honorable mentions. I have 6 top books of the year because I really could not choose one. I could not choose one to be an honorable mention. They all had to be my top. So I will not go in any particular order for these, mostly because I can't. I really just enjoyed them all. So the first is, I'm just gonna read them out how I like in terms of when I read them throughout the year. So Daisy Darker was my first 5-star read of the year, and still I think about it. This was Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I read it physically. I really enjoyed it. This was my first Alice Feeney, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. We are following Daisy Darker, who has gone back to her grandmother's house for her grandmother's 80th birthday, I want to say. And as well as the rest of her family, her 2 sisters, her mother and her father, as well as an unexpected family friend. So they go to the grandmother's house, who happens to live on this tidal island. And so they're kind of just stuck there. None of them really get along. And at midnight, the grandmother dies. And every hour after that, someone else ends up dying. Really kind of creepy. It really had me guessing the whole time. I stayed up until 2 in the morning trying to finish this book. I ended up crying a time or two. I cry at almost everything, okay? But I felt for Daisy Darker. She really just wanted her family to come together and like for her grandmother's birthday, and this ends up happening, and it's freaking her out and it's freaking everybody else out, but everyone's holding secrets, so the secrets end up getting exposed. I was really surprised by this. I really enjoyed it, and it really just like made me want to read more of Alice Dickey's work. My apologies if you can hear my dog whining in the background. Okay, next is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, narrated by Jay Asang and Michaela Asang. This one, okay, this one also surprised me because I've read Grady Hendrix before, the Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. That one, like, it had an interesting commentary, but otherwise, I just ultimately felt icky after reading it. It was, ugh. It just felt like Grady Hendrix was putting everything that makes everyone uncomfortable into one book. And he didn't get me with the dust, the bugs crawling in the ears or anything like that. He got me with the vampire itself. So ultimately just felt like he needed it out of my house. I'm still not sure about Grady Hendrix, so I decided to read How to Sell a Haunted House because haunted houses intrigue me. This one I thought was really interesting. We are following a woman who has a kid living, I think, in the Bay Area, but she ends up getting a call from her brother. Call or text? I feel like it could have been a text from her brother saying that their parents have died. Very unexpected to her. And so she ends up having to fly to her hometown, which I already forgot where that was. I feel like it's somewhere in the South, to try to help her brother sell her parents' house. But already there's like, we can see the sibling dynamic of them butting heads. Pride gets in the way, spite gets in the way, and ultimately selling this house is going to be way more complicated than we ever thought possible because of this dynamic. So as they're cleaning out the house, because they are going in to figure out like what to keep and what not to keep, because ultimately their mother was a bit of a creative hoarder. Something going on in the house. They end up finding a puppet that, and there's something about the house and the things inside. Like everything, I don't know how to explain it without spoiling it, but ultimately it was much more intense than I thought it was going to be. It was creepy as all heck. I was listening to this at work and jumping, I swear. I don't like puppets. I think they're creepy. So I know that a lot of people are just like, thought it was like not even scary at all because the narration made it sound like Mickey Mouse, which, I mean, to a sense, yes, but like it was also really weird. And that it was a puppet. How can you be scared of a puppet? Puppets are inherently creepy. Yeah, I don't know. It was just, to me, it fit. I know that was another critique too, was that the sibling dynamic, it was like too much. I could totally see this happening, particularly with the brother that I lost. We constantly butted heads, and so could easily see this happening with us. I would hope I wouldn't do some of the things that ended up happening in there, but yeah, no, that was intense. It was a lot. So I really enjoyed it. I immediately ended up getting a physical copy because I needed it. So I'm really confused on how I feel about Grady Hendrix's work now. I need to read more. Next is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, narrated by Samara McLaren. I love this book. If you could not tell by the amount of times I was trying to find a similar witchy cozy mystery that would fit this bill, nothing really could. I really just enjoyed this book. Samara McLaren does so well narrating this book. We are following a young witch who has been told time and time again throughout her life that witches cannot meet or do magic. She cannot befriend any other witches because when witches get together, bad things happen, and humans can't find out because then bad things happen. So she pretends to be a witch on YouTube, but then is found out of sorts by this found family who wants to hire her to tutor 3 young witches. She agrees to meet up with them these three young witches are children. They do need to hone their skills, and they're essentially in this estate with a groundskeeper and a cook and a housekeeper and a librarian. The librarian is very protective of his found family and immediately is skeptical of our main character, but it's kind of this like untrusting to love relationship. I just really enjoyed it. It was really cute. I love the elements. It was so visual and it was so and funny at times. Look, there was a good commentary on it. I really love how Sangu Mandana had constructed this, and I thought Samara did excellent in terms of creating the voices for the children. Loved it. So I would, my only critique, maybe just a touch more steam. Just a touch. Yeah, otherwise loved it. Cannot wait for Sangu Mandana's next work. His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. This was, oh my god. Okay. So this was brought to my attention by a coworker that no longer works with me. They were an emergency hire, which only tends to be a 6-month hire. I loved working with them for many reasons, but one of the reasons being that they were constantly trying to get me to read this series. I did finally listen to like 3 books this year from this series, but His Majesty's Dragon. Oh my god, I just loved it so much. Historical fiction fantasy. We are following Captain Lawrence, who is a captain in the British Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars. He captures a French frigate. Upon it, finds a dragon egg. It is his duty to take it back to Britain. It ends up hatching before they get there, and so then it is up to them to harness the dragon before it turns feral. The dragon can essentially choose its rider and ends up choosing Captain Lawrence. So Lawrence is no longer the captain of a ship. He is essentially the captain of a dragon, and what that means to be a dragon rider and to serve for the British Air Force in a Napoleonic War. And we get to explore all these things and question society through Timurr, the dragon's eyes, as well, in terms of why are things a certain way within Britain. So, and I think this one goes along really well with the second book, the Jade Throne, I believe, because we also get to explore how other cultures view their dragons in society and how the dragons fit within the culture. So yeah. I've been needing to finish the rest of the series, and I don't know why, but like I've been like not willing to pick up the 4th book, and I cannot tell you why. So, but the first book, like, I just love it. So, and I love the remastered covers by Ravina Kai. Just stunning. Next, I have The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi by S.A. Chakraborty, narrated by Lamise Isaac and Amin El-Gamal. This one was so fun. We are following Amina El-Sarafi, who is a retired pirate. She retired because she had a kid, but now she's being pulled out of her retirement by a socialite who needs her to find her granddaughter. Amina at first refuses, but then the socialite's making it hard for her to refuse, not only because of threats, but also because of the reward she's offering. It would set up her family for the rest of their lives. So Amina ends up agreeing to go on this search mission, and ends up bringing her whole crew out of retirement, essentially. And her crew is just, of course, is like ragtag group of people. I absolutely love these side characters. I love the fact that Amina is older. Like she mentions a couple of times that she's not as young as she used to. She has a bum knee. It's just amazing. They have to like break someone out of prison. I love it. It's great. I love the adventure we go on. It's very unique. I wholeheartedly am looking forward to the rest of the series. I enjoyed this to the point where I got the Fairy Loot Special Edition. I thought it was just so unique of a perspective, and just so fun. I don't know what else to say about it. I just loved it. And my final favorite book of the year was Happy Place by Emily Henry. This was also narrated by Julia Whalen, who, fantastic narrator. I know that people have mixed feelings about Happy Place. I am not one of them. I sobbed. Like I said, it doesn't take too much for me to sob, but I sobbed during this one. I love the emotions that Emily and Henry is able to evoke for me with these books. Happy Place in particular, we are following this woman who is on her way to an annual vacation with her friends. They all meet up at this beach house that one of the friends owns, but this is the last year they're able to go because it's ultimately being sold. I guess one of the friends' fathers owns it, so he's essentially selling it. So this is the last time that they can do this. As she gets there, she finds her ex-boyfriend, but all of her friends know him as her boyfriend because they haven't told anybody yet. And so they're about to like let them know, only for the couple that they always thought would never get married are announcing that they're going to get married. And so not to ruin the weekend, they pretend to continue to be a couple, or the week. I don't know how long this vacation is, but they pretend to still be a couple to kind of save face. And then after a little bit, they'll tell them that they broke up. However, there's obviously some feelings still around. The reason of their breakup is kind of unknown for a little bit, but it's because of the emotions. It's these presumed feelings of like, I wasn't good enough for you, I was not what you needed, and it was just so much. And I love the message of like, despite this, that your goals can change is what I'm liking. I thought the deception of one of the friends was really intricate and not unnecessary, like, but otherwise we wouldn't have a book, but I thought it was really intriguing. I wish we would have got a little more from the friends. Like, we didn't really know much about them. That I would have just enjoyed a bit more, but otherwise I really did enjoy this book. I thought it was very emotional. I thought it struck a chord with me, particularly as I'm constantly trying to figure out like what my next goal is, as well as the ever-changing dynamics of friendship. I loved it. And that is my best books of 2020. Oh, that's what I wanted. That's my best books of 2023. What were some of yours? Were any of these yours? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Otherwise, if you don't have the spoons to answer, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and just put a smiley face emoji. Any kind of smiley face emoji, mostly because I feel like all these books just gonna like light up my face. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting, and I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I hope to see you in another video very soon. Ciao.